Welcome to the Midnight Codex, where forgotten truths breathe and shadows tell their tale. Tonight, don't blink and don't look behind you.
I need to write this down. Maybe someone will believe me, but I don't think I have much time left. If you're reading this, I hope this serves as a warning. If anyone is out there who's still able to understand, not all choices are as clear-cut as we might think, and all of this started from a simple flyer. It was a Thursday morning, just as the soft drizzle of rain began to fall when I first saw it. A flyer stuck to the corner of the wall outside a convenience store. At first, I thought it was just another advertisement, but something about it, something unexplainable, made me stop and take notice. It wasn't like the usual flyers I ignored. This one was different. The paper was old, faded yellow, with a bent corner where it had been stuck. There was no fancy logo or company information, just a few bold lines printed on it with a typewriter font. Nothing too special at first glance, yet something pulled me in. The flyer read, Specialized Security Guard Position. Open position, night shift guard at Forsaken Mills Factory. Attractive salary, flexible working conditions, an opportunity for those seeking a stable job. Forsaken Mills, although abandoned for years, still requires someone to maintain order and oversee the premises during the night. Apply now to start working tomorrow. Contact us through the number below. I stood there for a moment, staring at the flyer. A strange, unexplainable feeling crept up my spine. The job sounded ordinary. An abandoned factory, a night shift, decent pay. On paper, it seemed harmless, even mundane. But something about it, it was too easy. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was pulling me in. Maybe it was desperation or maybe something else, but I couldn't look away. 3 months without a job. Bills piling up. No steady income. What else could I do but call the number? The following day, I got a call. The voice on the other end was calm, almost robotic. It didn't sound friendly or welcoming, just factual. They told me to arrive at Forsaken Mills at 7 p.m., and someone would meet me there. No pleasantries, no questions, just a simple instruction to show up. It struck me as odd, but I didn't question it. Desperation does strange things to a person. No back and forth, no interview, just come and work. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't afford to say no. When I arrived at Forsaken Mills that evening, the first thing I noticed was the silence. It was unlike any factory I had ever seen. Forsaken Mills was located on the outskirts of town, far removed from everything. Its shadow loomed in the distance, a towering structure that seemed to stretch into the gray sky. The gates were rusted, hanging on by sheer will, the paint chipped and faded, as if the factory had been abandoned long ago. I stood there for a moment, gazing up at the looming, dilapidated structure. It felt wrong, like I was about to step into something I couldn't undo. But I didn't know where else to go. The only thing louder than my heartbeat was the wind howling through the cracks in the building, echoing across the empty lot. The place looked forgotten. It felt abandoned, but it wasn't. Not yet. I stepped inside, and that was when I saw him, an older man standing near the entrance. His face was shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. He didn't speak much, just handed me a folded piece of paper made of thick stock. He didn't need to say anything. His eyes said it all. He gave me the rules. I unfolded the paper, which felt oddly stiff in my hands. The rules were simple at first glance, almost trivial, but there was something unsettling about them. Rule 1. Never turn on the main power at night. Rule 2. At midnight, lock yourself inside the control room. Do not leave until 3 a.m. Rule 3. Never look into the deep well at the far end of the warehouse. Rule 4. If you hear someone call your name, do not respond. Rule 5. The building will try to lure you at night. Resist the urge to follow it. I didn't understand. But the more I read them, the more I realized these rules were not just guidelines. They were warnings. There was a weight to them that I couldn't shake off. Why such specific and eerie instructions? Why the need for all this secrecy? Why Forsaken Mills? I didn't have time to wonder too much. The pay was good. I needed to work. I was already here. I told myself I'd follow the rules. What could go wrong? I started my shift at 7 p.m. The factory was dark, too dark. As I walked through its empty corridors, I could feel the heaviness in the air. The walls were lined with old machinery, rusted and abandoned, as though time had simply stopped here. The stench of oil and decay lingered in every corner. There was no movement, no life, just the sound of my boots against the concrete floor echoing through the vast empty space. It felt like a place forgotten by time. The silence was palpable, broken only by the occasional flicker of dim lights above me. The air felt thick, almost like it was pressing down on me. I had no idea why I felt so uneasy. I should have been calm. It was just a job, right? But that feeling, that growing discomfort, it wouldn't leave. I made my way to the security booth, settling in for what I thought would be a boring night. I scanned through the monitors, empty hallways, silent rooms, dusty shelves, nothing out of the ordinary. At midnight, I locked myself in the control room, as instructed. I thought I'd get through the night without much issue. The factory was still. I glanced at the clock and tried to distract myself, but the quiet was too unnerving. It was then that I heard it, a soft sound like a whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then it came again. My name. It was unmistakable. Dylan. It was coming from somewhere deep inside the factory, somewhere far off, somewhere I hadn't been yet. I didn't think it would be this quiet. The kind of silence that presses down on you, filling the air with an oppressive stillness. Not the calm quiet of an empty room, but the kind that makes you wonder if you're the only living thing left in the world. The air inside Forsaken Mills was thick with dust. Every breath I took felt like inhaling years of neglect. The walls creaked as if the factory itself was slowly waking from a long sleep, and the smell, mildew, rust, and oil, clung to everything. It was a place forgotten by time, abandoned and left to rot. And yet, I was here, walking deeper into its heart. I wasn't sure what I expected, but it wasn't this. The place was deserted, yes, but it had a presence. Something about it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Every shadow seemed to hold secrets. Every corner held a whisper of something long past. I walked cautiously, my boots echoing loudly on the cracked floor. It was then that I saw him. The man. He was standing in the middle of the hallway, a shadow in the dim light. His face was obscured by the brim of his cap, and his uniform, old, faded, and worn, looked like it had been worn by someone much older. He handed me a manila envelope without saying a word, his eyes barely meeting mine. "Read the rules," he muttered in a voice that seemed too tired for conversation. "Follow them." Before I could even respond, he turned and disappeared into the darkness, swallowed by the factory's depths. I stood there for a moment, the weight of his silence lingering in the air. Slowly, I opened the envelope, the paper inside thick and yellowed with age. The rules were typed on a single sheet, each one short and to the point. But as I read them, a strange unease began to settle in my gut. Rule 1. Do not ever turn on the main power at night. It was the first rule, and my mind immediately rebelled. I couldn't help but question it. Why not? A factory without power? How was I supposed to see anything? The place would be pitch black and the lights were flickering already. What would it hurt to switch on the main power? But the words on the page didn't leave room for doubt. The rule was clear. Do not ever turn on the main power at night. I shrugged. It sounded like an odd request, but it wasn't the end of the world. I'd follow the rule, for now. Rule 2. At midnight, lock yourself inside the control room. Do not leave until 3 a.m. Now this was getting stranger. Midnight to 3 a.m. I frowned. Why those specific hours, and why the control room? Why lock myself in there? I tried to make sense of it. Maybe the previous guard was paranoid. Maybe it was just protocol. The factory had been abandoned and it wasn't exactly bustling with activity. Maybe it was just a precaution, something the staff had insisted on to keep things running smoothly. But even as I read the words again, the unease deepened. Rule 3. Never look into the factory's deep well at the far end of the warehouse. The well. I remembered seeing it when I walked in. A deep, dark shape in the far corner of the warehouse. At first, I hadn't given it much thought, just a forgotten part of the building's infrastructure. But now, reading the rule, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Why never look into it? What was so dangerous about it? I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought, but the words kept echoing in my mind. Never look into the well. Rule 4. If you hear someone calling your name, do not respond. This one unsettled me more than I cared to admit. It wasn't just a rule, it was a warning. A very specific warning. What kind of place needed a rule like this? What if someone was in danger? What if I heard someone I knew? Would I just ignore them? What if it was someone who needed help? I thought about the other guards, the previous one who handed me the envelope. Had he heard voices too? I shivered, but the rule stood. Do not respond. Rule 5. The building will try to lure you at night. Fight the urge to follow it. This was the one that really made me pause. Lure me? The factory? What did that even mean? I could feel my skepticism growing with each rule I read, but this one was different. I could almost hear the whispers in the dark corners of my mind. Could the factory truly have a will of its own? Was it alive? Or was this just the result of someone who had worked in isolation for too long, their mind fraying under the pressure? I couldn't decide if I should laugh or shiver. I folded the paper back and placed it in the envelope, trying to ignore the growing discomfort that had begun to coil in my stomach. What kind of job was this? What kind of place was I working in? But I couldn't afford to question it further. I needed the money. I needed the job. As I walked to the control room, the rules ran through my mind. They seemed absurd, but there was no way around them. I had to follow them, or I risked something worse. But what? The first hour passed in eerie stillness. I sat at the control desk, the hum of the monitors the only sound. The factory was empty. At least, it should have been. The lights flickered every so often, casting long shadows across the room. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, but I managed to ignore it. By the time midnight approached, my nerves were on edge. I glanced at the clock. 11:45 p.m. I wasn't sure what to expect. I thought I'd heard every creak and groan the building had to offer, but the longer I sat there, the more the factory seemed to stretch around me. The walls felt like they were closing in, the silence like a weight pressing down on my chest. Then, it started. The first sound was faint, almost imperceptible, like a soft scratch across the walls. I paused, listening. Nothing. I shook my head. I was just imagining things. The wind outside, the building settling. I glanced at the clock again. 11:50 p.m. A thud this time, louder. It echoed through the halls, reverberating through the control room. My heart skipped a beat. My hands went cold. I stood up, walking toward the door, my breath shallow. Another thud. Then, a creak, followed by a faint scraping sound. It was coming from somewhere far off, deep within the factory. The sounds were growing louder, more distinct. I froze. The factory was empty. I was the only one here. But could I be sure? The lights flickered again. This time, it wasn't just a brief dimming. The lights blinked twice, and then everything went black. For a second, I was plunged into complete darkness. Then, they came back on, flickering, unstable, but on. I stood there in the dark, my pulse racing. The air felt colder. The quiet seemed deeper, more suffocating. I glanced at the clock again. 12 a.m. I locked the door. The rules. I had to follow the rules. But as I sat back down, my mind was racing. I wasn't sure if the building itself was the thing I should be afraid of, or something far worse. It's funny how quickly something that feels absurd can turn into your worst nightmare. What started as a simple set of rules, something I thought I could easily ignore, quickly morphed into a waking terror. As the days passed, the factory didn't just feel like a decaying relic. It began to feel alive. The first few nights weren't bad. In fact, they were quiet enough to make me feel like I had everything under control. I followed the rules. Well, most of them. And the factory remained as empty and desolate as I expected. The only thing that weighed on me was the ever-present silence. It wasn't just the quiet of an abandoned building. It was a silence that felt heavy, suffocating, like the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. But as the days wore on, I began to notice things. Little things at first. Things I thought I could dismiss as the usual creaks and groans of a rundown factory. Then, as the hours stretched into days, I couldn't ignore them any longer. It started with the machines. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I had to. There was no way I could be seeing what I thought I was seeing. I was sitting in the control room, staring at the monitors when I saw it. A rusted machine in the far corner of the warehouse began to move. Slowly, the gears inside it creaked, and the old brittle metal groaned as it came to life. I stared at the screen, unable to process what was happening. There was no power running. I knew that much. The factory was still supposed to be off, but the machine kept moving. And then another one followed, its wheels grinding, its long abandoned motors sputtering to life. The factory, which had been silent for so long, was waking up. The air was thick with the sounds of machines that shouldn't be moving at all. The whole place felt like it was coming back to life, as if it had never been abandoned. I shook my head, trying to focus. It was nothing. Just my imagination. I was tired, running on fumes. It was probably nothing. But the factory didn't stop there. Shadows started to shift in the corners of my vision. At first, I thought it was just my tired eyes, but the more I looked, the more real it became. Something was moving just outside the frame, darting from one shadow to another. The light above flickered, casting long, jagged shadows across the walls, and I could have sworn I saw figures standing in them, figures that disappeared as soon as I looked directly at them. I wasn't sure anymore. Was it the darkness playing tricks on me? Or was something actually in the factory with me? The unease settled in quickly. The machines weren't just turning on by themselves. They were starting to hum with purpose. The factory wasn't just a building anymore. It was like it was alive, breathing, waking up. I couldn't escape the feeling that it was watching me, that it was waiting for something I wasn't ready for. It was the third night when everything truly started to spiral out of control. I had been following the rules, sticking to the routine. The power had been off, and I hadn't broken the first rule, not until tonight. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was something darker, but I found myself standing in front of the main power switch, staring at it like it held the answers to questions I hadn't even asked yet. Rule 1. Do not ever turn on the main power at night. I knew it. I had read it 100 times, but I couldn't help myself. I flicked the switch. The moment I did, the factory came alive. The lights flickered to life, and for a brief moment, everything seemed normal. The hum of the machines echoed in the stillness of the factory. But that's when I heard it. A low, distant hum that rose from deep within the factory, like a whisper that was far too quiet to understand. I didn't want to look at the monitors, but I did. I couldn't help myself. And that's when I saw it. At the far corner of the factory, in a room I hadn't noticed before, something moved. A figure. Number. It was more like a blur, an impossible shape that flickered in and out of sight. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, but it was still there. A dark, shifting mass that seemed to pulse with the factory's energy. My heart began to race as I watched the screen. I should have turned the power off. I should have followed the rules, but I couldn't look away. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't explain what I was seeing. The footage on the screen was blurry, distorted, but I could make out shapes, figures in old factory uniforms, moving about like normal workers. But something was wrong. They were moving too slowly, their faces twisted with fear and confusion, and then one of them turned to the camera. His face was pale, gaunt, and his eyes were wide with terror. He opened his mouth, but the words were muffled, too distorted to understand. But when the footage cleared for a split second, I saw it. Soul. Harvest! The words stuck with me. I couldn't look away. I needed to know more. I stumbled backward, the footage still running on the monitor. My head was spinning. Soul harvest? What did that mean? What had been happening here all those years ago? The factory wasn't just haunted, it was something worse. It had history, dark history. I had broken the first rule, and now I had seen too much. The factory, it seemed, wasn't just a building. It was alive in some way, alive and waiting. I stood up, my legs shaking, and made my way toward the room where I had seen the shadow move. The power was on, but something felt different now. The air was heavier, thicker, and the machines, no longer just moving on their own, had become part of something else. They seemed to hum now, vibrating with energy. I reached the door, and then I heard it. A whisper, so faint at first I thought I was imagining it. But then it came again. Dylan. I froze. It was a voice I knew, but I couldn't place it. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was real. I turned, heart pounding in my chest. The factory was silent. The lights flickered, and then I heard it again. Louder. Dylan. My name echoed in the dark, and I felt the walls close in around me. I had heard this voice before. I didn't know where. I didn't know when. But I knew it. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe, and then the whispers stopped. The silence was worse. The silence told me everything I needed to know. Whatever was here, whatever was waiting for me. It knew my name. It was watching me. I couldn't stay in the control room any longer. The silence, thick and suffocating, pressed in on me. It was as if the factory itself was waiting for me to make a move, to give in to the pull that had been growing since the moment I stepped inside. The rules, the factory, they weren't just warnings anymore. They were a part of me. But curiosity, that deep gnawing curiosity, had already taken hold. And when that happens, nothing at all, can keep you from discovering what lies in the dark. The air was colder now, sharper, as if the factory was alive in its own way. I moved through the halls, each step echoing in the vast empty space. The machines, still humming softly, were somehow more ominous now. The walls seemed to shift around me, their edges warping in the periphery of my vision. I couldn't tell if it was my mind playing tricks on me or if the factory was, indeed, alive. But there was one thing that had caught my attention the night before. The well. I had tried to ignore it. I'd told myself it was nothing. But tonight, the urge to see it was stronger than ever. I walked to the far end of the warehouse where the well sat. It stood there in the dim light, dark and foreboding, like an eye watching me, waiting. I tried to push the fear aside. I tried to remind myself of the rules, never look into the well, but the words felt distant, almost irrelevant now. The air around the well felt thick, as if something was drawing me closer. The ground beneath my feet seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, like the factory was alive, feeding off my every step. I leaned over the edge, my breath catching in my throat as I peered into the darkness. At first, I saw nothing. Just blackness, a deep, endless void. But then, something began to form. It was me. The face in the well was mine, but it wasn't. I stared, transfixed, at the reflection that seemed to emerge from the depths of the water. My face, but twisted. Hollow eyes, sunken deep into my skull. My skin was stretched too tight, pale and lifeless. There was no expression, no emotion, just an empty shell staring back at me. I stepped back, but my body didn't respond. My legs felt like lead, my hands trembling as I tried to pull myself away. But the reflection held me there, as if it was calling me, pulling me deeper into the well. I couldn't look away. I couldn't move. It was like the factory itself had rooted me to the spot, forcing me to witness something I wasn't supposed to see. I could feel my breath quicken, my pulse hammering in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I was rooted. I was trapped. The voice inside my head whispered, "Look deeper." I tried to fight it. I tried to move, to break free from the compulsion to stay. But the well, the darkness inside it, had control over me. It was pulling me in, deeper and deeper, and I couldn't stop it. I could feel something else there, something darker, something ancient. The reflection in the well didn't just look like me. It was me, but a version of me that had been twisted by the factory, by whatever forces were lurking in the shadows. This place wasn't just abandoned. It had been waiting, watching, waiting for someone like me. I stumbled back, gasping for air, my mind reeling from the sight of the reflection. I had to get away from it. I had to leave. I turned, but the factory wasn't done with me. The door behind me slammed shut. The room felt smaller, the walls closer, pressing in on me. The silence was no longer comforting. It was oppressive, suffocating. I ran, my feet pounding on the concrete, but every step seemed to take me deeper into the darkness. The factory's hum grew louder, a low, unsettling sound that seemed to vibrate through my bones. I made my way back toward the control room, hoping to lock myself away again, to hide from whatever was pulling at me. But as I turned the corner, I froze. The door was wide open. I stood there for a moment, my heart racing, my mind struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. The door had been locked, I was sure of it. There was no way it could have opened on its own. No way anyone could have opened it. But there it was, hanging wide, as if it had been waiting for me to walk through. A cold draft swept through the hallway, brushing against my skin, sending a "eads" shut. The factory had taken my freedom, and now it was tightening its grip. And that's when I saw him, the keeper. He was a grotesque figure, ancient and decayed, his skin cracked and peeling like old parchment. His eyes were hollow, glowing with an unnatural light that seemed to pierce through me. His presence radiated an aura of cold, overwhelming power, and when he spoke, it was like the words echoed inside my very soul. "You've broken the rules," he rasped, his voice like the grinding of stone, "and now you must pay the price." I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by fear, my heart hammering in my chest as the keeper stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "This place, this factory, it is mine," he continued, his voice dripping with malice. "Its soul is tied to mine, and now yours is too." I opened my mouth to protest, but no words came. I tried to step back, but my feet wouldn't move. I was trapped, caught in the web of the factory's influence. "I offer you a choice," the keeper said, his voice suddenly calm, almost soothing. "Stay. Become part of this place. Your soul will serve me, and you will live on in the shadows of this factory. You will be eternal, part of something much greater than yourself. Or," he paused, his smile widening, a cold, cruel smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Or you may leave," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But in doing so, you will face eternal torment. You will never escape. You will be trapped as the others are. Do you understand the price of survival?" I felt the weight of his words settle over me, the truth of what he was offering sinking in. The factory's power, its pull, it was impossible to ignore now. I could feel it, crawling under my skin, wrapping around my heart. It wanted me. It needed me. And in a way, it had already claimed me. The keeper's eyes gleamed with a twisted satisfaction as he awaited my answer. His smile was a grim reminder that there was no easy escape from forsaken mills. Whatever choice I made, whatever path I took, I knew there was no return. I had broken the rules. I had chosen to enter this nightmare, and now I had to pay the price. The factory had woken up. It wasn't just the machines humming again or the walls creaking under the weight of time. It was something deeper, something more visceral. The air was thick, vibrating with an energy I couldn't quite understand. It was alive, and it was waiting. As I walked through the corridors, the factory felt different. The shadows clung to the walls like living things, curling and shifting in the corners of my eyes. The space around me seemed to distort, like I was moving through a dream or a nightmare. I had broken the rules. Each step I took deeper into its heart had fed it, made it stronger. I could feel its power wrapping around me, tightening its grip. And yet, I couldn't stop. I was compelled to go on. I had no plan now, no goal. To wake up, its grip on me tightening. But nothing compared to Rule 5. Rule 5. The building will try to lure you at night. Fight the urge to follow it. I thought I had resisted. I thought I could handle it. But as I stood at the edge of the factory's deepest, darkest corner, I realized that everything I had been warned about was real. The factory wasn't just a building. It was a trap. And I had walked right into it. The door had appeared out of nowhere, tucked away in a forgotten hallway where there had been nothing before. The air around it shimmered with a strange energy, as though it had always been there, just waiting for me. The voice in my head had been urging me on, too faint to be sure at first, but growing louder with every step. Go to it. Go to the door. The words echoed in my mind like a compulsion, a pull I couldn't resist. I knew what lay beyond the door was dangerous, but at that moment, I didn't care. I reached for the handle. The moment I touched it, the door creaked open, as if expecting me. Inside, the room was vast, stretching beyond what should have been possible in the factory. The space felt wrong, unfamiliar, yet somehow familiar. It was like I had been here before, even though I knew I hadn't. The walls were slick with a dark, sticky substance. The floor was warped, uneven, as if the very foundations of the building had been twisted over time. In the center of the room stood a large, rusted contraption. It resembled an old machine, but its design was unlike anything I had ever seen. Tubes snaked through the walls, disappearing into the darkness, and strange, blood-red liquid pulsed through them as if the machine itself was breathing. I could feel the air around me grow heavier, more suffocating. And that's when I saw them. The faces. They were not just faces. They were souls, trapped and pressed against the walls. Their eyes were wide with terror, their mouths frozen in silent screams. They were still, but they weren't gone. They were watching me. They were pleading with me. Their faces contorted in a horrifying mix of fear and resignation. I could feel their pain, their anguish, as if it was seeping into me through the walls, filling my mind with their torment. And then I understood. The factory wasn't abandoned. It had never been abandoned. It had been feeding on them, feeding on their souls. The workers, the guards, they were all part of it now. Their souls were trapped in the walls, serving the factory in a twisted, never-ending cycle. And now, it was offering me the same fate. I turned to leave. I had to leave. But as I turned, the walls seemed to close in around me. The door I had entered through was gone. The hallway had disappeared, replaced by more darkness, more twisted machinery. The factory was alive. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My legs were shaking, my mind reeling. I didn't know what to do, where to go. Every exit had been blocked. Every door had been shut. The factory had taken my freedom, and now it was tightening its grip. And that's when I saw him, the keeper. He was a grotesque figure, ancient and decayed, his skin cracked and peeling like old parchment. His eyes were hollow, glowing with an unnatural light that seemed to pierce through me. His presence radiated an aura of cold, overwhelming power, and when he spoke, it was like the words echoed inside my very soul. "You've broken the rules," he rasped, his voice like the grinding of stone, "and now you must pay the price." I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by fear, my heart hammering in my chest as the keeper stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "This place, this factory, it is mine," he continued, his voice dripping with malice. "Its soul is tied to mine, and now yours is too." I opened my mouth to protest, but no words came. I tried to step back, but my feet wouldn't move. I was trapped, caught in the web of the factory's influence. "I offer you a choice," the keeper said, his voice suddenly calm, almost soothing. "Stay. Become part of this place. Your soul will serve me, and you will live on in the shadows of this factory. You will be eternal, part of something much greater than yourself." Or, he paused, his smile widening, a cold, cruel smile that sent a chill down my spine. Or you may leave, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. But in doing so, you will face eternal torment. You will never escape. You will be trapped as the others are. Do you understand the price of survival? I felt the weight of his words settle over me, the truth of what he was offering sinking in. The factory's power, its pull, it was impossible to ignore now. I could feel it, crawling under my skin, wrapping around my heart. It wanted me. It needed me. And in a way, it had already claimed me. The keeper's eyes gleamed with a twisted satisfaction as he awaited my answer. His smile was a grim reminder that there was no easy escape from Forsaken Mills. Whatever choice I made, whatever path I took, I knew there was no return. I had broken the rules. I had chosen to enter this nightmare, and now I had to pay the price. The factory had woken up. It wasn't just the machines humming again or the walls creaking under the weight of time. It was something deeper, something more visceral. The air was thick, vibrating with an energy I couldn't quite understand. It was alive, and it was waiting. As I walked through the corridors, the factory felt different. The shadows clung to the walls like living things, curling and shifting in the corners of my eyes. The space around me seemed to distort, like I was moving through a dream or a nightmare. I had broken the rules. Each step I took deeper into its heart had fed it, made it stronger. I could feel its power wrapping around me, tightening its grip. And yet, I couldn't stop. I was compelled to go on. I had no plan now, no goal. All I knew was that I had to get out. I had to escape. But the closer I got to the exit, the more impossible it seemed. The air felt heavier, as though the walls themselves were closing in on me. Each step I took, the factory seemed to shift, to adjust to my movements. It was alive, and it knew I was here. It knew what I was trying to do. The factory was pulling me in, trapping me. I reached the end of the hallway, the exit. But the door, it was locked. No, not locked. It was sealed. I slammed my hand against the cold metal, panic surging in my chest. I twisted the handle, yanked on it, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the factory itself had placed its hand on the door, holding it shut, keeping me from leaving. The whispers grew louder in my mind. I could hear them all now, voices of the people who had worked here, the souls trapped in the walls, trapped by the very factory that had claimed them. You're not getting out. The words weren't spoken aloud, but I heard them in my head, as though they were coming from the factory itself. I could feel their eyes on me. I could feel the weight of their gazes, accusing me. But I wouldn't give up. I couldn't. I took a deep breath, stepped back, and turned away from the door. The only way out, I realized, was not through the exit, but through the factory's very core. I had to break free. I had to make it out, even if it meant destroying the factory itself. I moved deeper into the factory. The air thickened with every step I took. The walls seemed to pulse, as if the factory was breathing. The machinery, still humming from earlier, had begun to shift, its gears grinding against one another, like something ancient waking from a long slumber. The lights flickered overhead, casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. The factory was alive. I had no choice but to keep moving forward, my heart racing, my breath shallow. I knew the truth now. This place wasn't just a factory. It was a trap, designed to lure souls, to feed on them, to entrap them forever. The rules had never been about keeping me safe. They were part of the factory's ritual, a ritual designed to claim me, to make me part of it. And now I was too far gone to escape. I moved through the hallways, the walls tightening around me, the air growing colder. I could hear the machines, the hum, the grind, the rhythm. It was like the factory itself was a beating heart, and I was its prey. I stumbled through a door, into a dimly lit room, the walls covered with old machinery I couldn't even begin to understand. And there, in the center of it all, stood the keeper. The figure was ancient, a grotesque silhouette. Its body was hunched, its skin cracked and withered, as though it had been molded from decay itself. The eyes, hollow and empty, glowed with a sickly light, staring through me like they could see into the very marrow of my bones. The air around it was suffocating, thick with a presence that made my chest feel tight. I couldn't breathe. "You've broken the rules," the keeper rasped, its voice cold and hollow, "and now you must pay the price." I stood frozen, my legs shaking beneath me. The keeper's gaze was unwavering. It didn't need to speak again. Its presence was enough to fill the room with a suffocating weight. I could feel the factory all around me, inside me, in every breath I took, in every beat of my heart. I had been drawn here, and now the keeper would claim me. "You have two choices," the keeper continued, its voice like a cold whisper. "You can stay, become part of this place, become part of the factory's soul, or—" It paused, the darkness in its eyes deepening. "Or you can leave," it said, its voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "But in doing so, you will never be free. You will be lost, trapped in eternal torment, wandering in this place forever." I could feel the walls pressing in on me, the air getting heavier. I wanted to scream, to fight, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I was paralyzed by fear and the overwhelming weight of the decision that loomed before me. I had already broken the rules, I'd already made my choices, but now I had to choose what came next. The keeper's smile was cold, cruel, and filled with the promise of something far darker than I could comprehend. "You are already part of it," the keeper said, its voice laced with finality. "No matter what you choose, you will never escape this place. You belong to Forsaken Mills now." I turned away, my heart pounding in my chest. But no matter how fast I ran, no matter how far I tried to go, the factory kept pulling me back. The power had grown too strong. The rules, they weren't meant to protect me. They were designed to trap me, to keep me here. The doors were locked, the hallways endless, and every exit I tried to reach only led me deeper into the factory's heart. The factory had me. As I ran through the dark corridors, the whispers followed me. I could hear them clearer now, the voices of those who had come before me, trapped like I was. "You're not alone." The factory was alive, and it wasn't letting me go. I felt the cold hand of despair wrap around me, and I knew then there was no escape, no way out. The factory had claimed me. I don't know how much longer I have, but if anyone reads this, heed the rules. You're never really alone here.